The title of Kampaku was similar to the title of Sessho, which I covered in the last video. However, it was different. Kanpaku is often translated into English as regent, like Sessho, and while in time the Kanpaku would become essentially a regent, this does not seem to have been the original intent of the position. When romanized, the title can be written either as Kampaku with an M sound M or Kanpaku with an N, with Kampaku with the M appearing to be more common in English sources, so you may see it either way. But be aware that when written in hiragana, at least in modern Japanese, it is written with the N hiragana, which is romanized as just an N. N being the only hiragana without what in English would be called a vowel sound. It is not written with one of the or M rows of hiragana, ma, mi, mu, me, mo, with the vowel sound dropped when spoken, which is something that happens in spoken Japanese, dropping that vowel sound sometimes. So like Sessho, Kanpaku was also Ryoge no Kan, which were developed outside the Ritsuryo. Unlike the Sessho, the Kanpaku was not, at least initially, supposed to be essentially ruling in the name of the emperor. However, there were some earlier instances of the Kanpaku making decisions on behalf of the emperor. Rather, the Kanpaku was, at first, more like a liaison between the emperor and the Daijokan, Council of State, as well as one of the emperor's highest and closest advisors. Other than advising, it was through the Kanpaku that official correspondence, edicts, decisions, appointments, policy decisions, recommendations, and so on were passed between the emperor and the Daijokan. Even though the Kanpaku was usually not supposed to make decisions at that time, this position did give the Kanpaku the ability to use his power and influence to try to influence the decisions, appointments, and so on. Of course, this would not always work, and there would be, of course, conflicts, but this position did afford the possibility of being what could be considered the de facto power in the imperial government. With the Fujiwara rise to power in the 10th and into the 11th centuries, they eventually secured control over and hereditary rights to the titles of Sessho and Kanpaku. Under them, the office of Kanpaku essentially became a regent for an adult emperor who should have been able to fully participate in government. Over time, the two offices both were usually in practices offices that would make the decisions of the imperial government theoretically on behalf of the emperor. A distinction with little difference. That is extremely oversimplified, but the details and process of this are far beyond the scope of this video. This was the situation until the emperors came up with a kind of countermeasure called the insei. And now that I've mentioned it, I feel like that should be my next video, even though I have not originally planned it to be. As with many of the other imperial offices, the actual power and influence of the Kanpaku declined overall during the centuries of what is often simplified as warrior rule. But the imperial court was not as utterly powerless and impotent as it is often portrayed in popular culture. Although the whole imperial court stuff in pre-modern Japan was much more complex and nuanced than these simple videos about terminology can explain. During the restructuring of the government following the Meiji Restoration in the late 1800s, the office of Kanpaku was abolished. Thank you so much for joining me and watching this video. I appreciate you giving me your time. Please check out the playlist for other videos on kanji and vocabulary words by myself and Anthony Cummings. Until next time, otsukaresama deshita.